Welcome to Raising Eight, the podcast that proves a full house is more than just a TV show. Meet the dad who's raised 8 kids and 2 grandkids under one roof and has the scars and dad jokes to show for it. Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's talk family, big family.
Good afternoon, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. You can always reach me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or any of my social media platforms. If you are a regular listener, I appreciate you coming back. If you're a new listener, hopefully this topic's going to get you or some of your friends to listen to my podcast. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a podcast on fatherhood at the suggestion of one of my friends, because if you don't know, I have 8 children, 20 grandchildren, and I've been doing this a while. So when I did this podcast for fatherhood, it kind of felt like I didn't have enough time to talk about everything because there's so much involved as being a dad. And so I wanted to do a series of podcasts. So my daughter suggested I do that. And so I'm going to do 8 or 10 podcasts that kind of go in chronological order of how I had kids or when I had kids. But I think this podcast primarily is going to be about kind of the foundation of where I'm headed with this whole podcast. And I'll tell you a couple things, and if you haven't listened to me before, sometimes I get a little all over the board, but there's a lot to discuss. And if you're a new dad and you have kids already, or your kids are junior high or elementary school or whatever, or if you're planning on having children, I think this podcast will be interesting. And believe me, being a father is one of the most successful things I've ever done in my life. But it's not for the faint of heart. There's always things going on. After 39 years of being a parent, there's always something going on that could affect your life and the trajectory of your life. So I can tell you what this is not is I'm not an expert, right? I guess if anybody's done anything for 39 years, they probably pick up some skills of the craft. But I can assure you, I'm not an expert, and I got news for you. There's no such thing as an expert on fatherhood because everything's different. I'm an old school guy, right? So I'm a baby boomer. So I was raised in the 60s and 70s, and the uh, lessons I learned from my parents are very different than the lessons you learned from your parents, especially if you're just having kids. Your parents are probably my kids' age. So, not too much has changed, but I wanted to do something from the father's perspective. So after looking for podcasts about fathers talking about their kids, you don't find as many as you do about moms finding their kids. And I think we could all, or raising their kids, I think we can all agree that men and women think a little differently about a multitude of things, and parenting is no different. I don't think moms are more important than fathers, and I don't think fathers are more important than mom. I think it's a collective effort. And if you do it right, you'll have less pain. And I'm here to tell you, I did not always do it right. There's no workbook when you have kids. There's no user's guide, and there never has been. There's over 5 billion people on Earth, so apparently people keep doing it. And the second thing is when that child is finally born, or you adopt a child, or you do it through whatever way you end up with a child, they're a 1 in 400 trillion miracle. And that's just scientific evidence that it's anybody who's born is a miracle, and it's 1 in 400 trillion. And I put down in my notes a space of judgment. I'm not judging anybody the way they raise their kids. We all have different, we all grew up with different parents. We're all at different places in our life. And my daughter sent me this video the other day. And if you know who Mel Robbins is, she's one of the top podcasters in the world. And she had a doctor on her podcast, and he said a statement that didn't make any sense at first until he explained it. And he said that every child in every household is raised they're not raised by the same parent. And what he meant by that is having a child at 25 versus having a child at 35. And you have no child is raised the same way, just in the pecking order, the way they were, if you're the first, second, third, fourth, fifth child, they're going to get parented differently. It depends on where you're at emotionally. It depends on where your wife's at emotionally, or the mother. We'll say that. I'm probably going to say some things like that that may insult you. I don't mean to do that. I'm just speaking the truth, my truth. And if you get your feelings hurt, then you shouldn't. Um, so I wasn't sure how to start this podcast off because, like I said, I really need to kind of lay a foundation. So again, I was born in the '60s, early '60s, and my parents did the traditional way. They dated, they got married, they had kids, and they parented us, right? And they did the best they could economically and all those things. And my dad was kind of the disciplinarian, and my mom was kind of the nurturer, which is typical, I think. And I'm going to have at some point some moms on this podcast so they can kind of give us their input. And this is not a cut to moms. This is just I don't know, especially physically, all the things they have to go through. I could guess at it and I'd be wrong, so that's not something I want to do. My wife, the mother of my children, did what the right things they were doing as mothers, and I was doing trying to do the right thing as father because it's different. Your perception's different. And I'll give you an example, and this might be a silly example, but when I was growing up, um, we were very poor when we were younger, and as we progressed, about the parents parenting different. My parents were getting along better. We moved to a different area and to a nicer area. I was playing sports on a regular basis. And my dad would always come to my sporting events, whether it was baseball, basketball, whatever I was playing, he would make sure he got there and watched the game. My mom could care less about sports, and it didn't hurt my feelings at all. She just didn't care. She didn't care, and it didn't bother me. The only time my mom would go to a game is if it was like a Friday night basketball game, and after the game, my parents were going to take us to dinner, and my mom would go so she could eat. And that's not because she was cold. It was just she didn't care about the sporting part of it. And so she had different, she was a nurturer. She was the one that would, she wanted me to be successful in different ways than my dad did. And I can tell you that I became a parent in 1986, and things were much different than they are now. I don't even know what your generation is called anymore. I mean, I'm a baby boomer. My wife's a Gen X, and then there's all these other ones. I don't even know what they're called. But we definitely have different opinions on parenting probably than I grew up with. And that's the only example I had was my mom and dad. Or as the kids got older, I had friends, I had a mother-in-law, I had that's the only examples that we had about kids. And we did things that you would cringe now, as a parent that my parents did or that I did as a parent. You might cringe at it. I don't know. We felt it was common sense. So, and that's only because we could only learn what we could learn. I'll give you an example. When we were little kids and we got ill, if we had a cold or sickness or stomach flu or something, my mom would give us a spoonful of castor oil. And I've said this, I've talked about this on my podcast before. Castor oil, a spoonful will empty you out. Okay. You will not be sick after you take castor oil because it just clears out your whole system. Sounds barbaric when I think about it. I would never give my kids castor oil, but my mom did. So there's two things that happened. One, we didn't get sick very often, or we didn't tell them we were sick if we were sick, because no one wanted castor oil. But it worked, and we didn't get sick. Something that my parents didn't concentrate on, and I probably didn't concentrate on as much that and I should have a little light. I should have a light go on every time I give a piece of advice that I really want you to listen to. If you're doing the traditional relationship, you start to date somebody and then you eventually you date for a while and you get to know each other and then you ask them to marry you and then you have a wedding and you're going to have kids and your perception of this is just going to be you're going to skip through the park all the time. And when you have children, they're going to go to dance lessons and they're going to do soccer and they're going to be the cutest little things you've ever seen. Um, you need to rethink your life. Now, again, most proud thing I am of my kids. That's the right kind of pride. They're the best success I've ever had, and as well as my current marriage, it's the most successful I've ever been. I'm a Catholic, and when you go to get married in a Catholic church, they make you take classes. And they're usually stupid classes. I got news for you. So I've been married, and we'll get to that. And the classes are just to kind of make you aware of what family life is about, what married life is about. And usually the people that are teaching the classes, in my experience, are the most boring people you could ever imagine, right? They don't have they have very little experience in life, in my opinion, that would lead them to be able to teach this class. And maybe I'm the wrong, maybe I'm the crazy one, and I just got into situations where my experiences were different than theirs. But as I went through the first class of my first marriage, when I went to the classes, they were really just ridiculous. And you had to take them to get married. So you had to present a certificate to the priest, and then you paid, the priest or whatever, and you got married. They don't do that when you have kids. You don't have to go to a class before you have kids. But how that relates to having kids, it's been my experience with myself and with people that I know that the stronger your relationship is with your spouse or your girlfriend or whoever, the better and easier it's going to be to parent. If there's friction in a relationship and you're trying to parent a child, it can cause havoc in your parenting skills. 100% guaranteed. You can see that in divorced couples when they start to, not get along and their kids start acting out and things like that. My grandson said to me brilliant the other day. He says, "Is it true that if you're really stressed out and you hold a baby, that the baby gets stressed out?" And I said, in my experience, 100% true. So our first child was born in 1986, and we were like every other married couple out there. I did the whole thing. I dated my wife. We got engaged. We got married, and we had a child right away. So we got married on March 1st, and in December, at the end of December, we had our first child. Um, so we were struggling like everybody else. And all we had is, like I said, the opinions of my mom, my mother-in-law about how to take care of a child. We didn't have the resources you have today. Not that those resources do you any good. When you start to raise kids, you'll see what I'm talking about. And as I get into this podcast, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And we did not know what we were doing. Um, I went to work all day, and my wife stayed home with my daughter, and it was fine, right? So I would get off work, come home, and I'd usually try to take the baby from her so she can get a break, right? She's been doing this all day, and you know, our first child cried a lot and she was kind of just stressed out, and I think it was because we were stressed out. At the time, I worked for Pepsi, and I used to wear a uniform. So I'd come home, dark pants, and I had a striped white and blue shirt. And I would take my daughter from my wife, and almost immediately she'd throw up on me, right? It's you're gonna love this one. It's formula, and it smells horrible, and it's disgusting. But that's just part of being a mom and a dad, right? You're gonna get these things. So I think what we were doing unknowingly was when she cried, we would feed her, right? And obviously, we were topping her off like a gas tank, and she was getting too much to eat. And when she came home, her gas tank emptied up, either on me or on my wife or, the couch or whatever. And I'm not faulting my wife for it. She was doing the best she knew how to do. And she would get frustrated when you're with a baby all day and that baby's crying the whole time. It's frustrating. Now, the beautiful part of that having that baby is she was beautiful, and we would take her for walks, and we would go to people's houses, and they'd fawn over her, and that was the great thing. It's like, yeah, that's my girl, she's the best in the world, and all that. And that's that kind of that pride thing. But I can tell you, when she was born on the 18th of December, and on the 24th of December, my mom would always have a Christmas party. And we got in this discussion, is a fight, but let's call it discussion, with my wife and her mother about us taking the baby to this Christmas party because we were down in PB and this was up in Poway. This is a 30-minute drive. Had car seats, we had all that stuff that we needed, but they just felt like that baby was too young to be around anybody because of getting sick and things like that. I ultimately won that argument. Well, I don't know if I won because she was probably mad at me for a month. But we took her to the party. She was fine. We came home. Everything was good. These days, I see moms out there, kids 2 or 3 days old, man, they're out grocery store, they're out doing whatever they want. It's one of those generational things that has changed over the years. You can imagine you'd always hear people talk about these women in China where they were, out farming and they have a kid and then they get, they just keep farming. They just wrap the kid in a swaddling cloth or something and keep farming. Um, so I think I'll back up a little bit. I always wanted kids. When I was a younger man, I wanted kids. I thought it was just a natural progression. I just thought you just got married and then had kids. And I didn't do it for any other reason is that I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And it worked out fine. But, as you're thinking about, starting a family, there's a lot of things to think about. And I don't, I'm not here to talk you out of having a family. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Hands down, nothing better. It kept me motivated. It helped with my trajectory professionally. It helped in a lot of different ways. It kept me motivated. The day that child was born, it changed my life for in all good ways. I you know, was a carefree young man before that, and when I had my daughter, that all ended, and I was home with her as much as I could. I tried to help my wife as much as she could, as much as I could, and I'd try to stay up, with the baby if so that she could get rest. And that didn't always work out. It seems me and babies don't usually get along too good. I think because my head's probably bigger. My head's probably bigger than the child, so I think they get intimidated. And but I tried to do that. And kind of my perception of being a father is now I'm responsible financially. Now I have to protect my family, right? At any cost, I'm going to protect my family, my wife, and my child. And that was kind of that's kind of what I thought my goals were or my job was. My wife, on the other hand, had a 9 month gestation period, right? She had to deal with a lot of hormonal changes and things. And like I said, I don't want to insinuate what moms go through. We'll get a mom on here and she can talk about those things. And we may get a teacher on here that they can tell you about how fathers and mothers relate to their children. Whoever we can get on this podcast that can give another point of view other than mine, because mine's going to be short sighted. I only know what I can tell you about me. So, not long after Samantha was born, my oldest daughter, we had a boy, Tanner, and he was born on February 3rd, 1988. So, little bit more than a year after that. Now we have another child. Um, but things have changed, right? So my job was different. I hope we were better at being parents. We didn't overflow the tank, overflow the tank on him. Although he was one of these kids that would just eat like he just ate. I mean, he was just a typical boy in that way that he was going to eat as much as he could. And so we had that going on. So now things have changed, right? We're in a different place where we're living. We're parenting different. We're getting better at this. He had some medical issues we needed to take care of, nothing severe, but things we had to make sure he took care of. He walked at 8 months, 7, 8 months. He walked, which was amazing to me because most kids, 9, 10 months or whatever, it depends on the child. I can remember watching a football game and he walked in front of me or watching some kind of sport. And he walked in front of me and I'm like, kind of thinking, he's not old enough to walk, but he did. And he never stopped walking after that. And then lo and behold, another year later, year and a few months, we have another child. So now we have 3 children. We haven't even been married 5 years yet. And the same thing. Now we're in another place. I have a different job again. Same. I was still working at Pepsi. I was just in a different position. And, my wife's getting really good at this stuff now. She's learning how to manage all this. And keep in mind that we didn't have all the equipment you have now. We had umbrella strollers and stuff that would break your back. I don't even think we had a stroller that hold two kids. We must have, but we had bike seats for the kids just when we had the two, and we would take them. And I think we got a trailer later. So we were living down by the beach, so it was fun to go down to the beach and ride around. And again, as a dad, I'm thinking, okay, I need more money. I need to get a better promotion. I need to do things differently, and I'm there to protect my wife. Again, she's gone through all the physical parts of this that I don't understand. I don't know if I want to understand. I was in the hospital room when every child was born. Now, I wasn't sitting there with the catcher's mitt down at home plate, but I was in the room, and I don't really have a weak stomach, so it didn't bother me to be in the room. And I'm trying to help her. I'm trying to encourage her. Generally, she's hating me at any time she's having pain. It's because it's my fault, and that's just a funny thing that guys and girls go through. She didn't think it was funny, but and I wasn't laughing, but it's just that thing where there's nothing I can do to help her. All I can do is try to encourage her, and whatever classes I took, like what do they call them, Lamaze classes, whatever I took, I'm trying to remember helping her to breathe and stuff like that. Again, she doesn't think any of that's funny, and I'm trying to do the best I can. At this point in our marriage, we're starting to have some issues in our relationship, and I'm going to go back to that a lot because we didn't do a good job preparing in our relationship. And if we would have done that, either two things would have happened. We would have been better parents because we were managing our expectations and all that better, or we would have never gotten married. I don't know. But if we would have done a little bit more front end work, and that sounds like the typical guy, right? If we would have been more organized, we would have done that. I'm thinking that way. Love has a lot of pieces to it. You can say, well, if you're in love, everything's going to be fine. Well, if love was an umbrella, you'd have under that umbrella expectations, you'd have intimacy, you'd have discipline, you'd have all these other things that are encompassed in that word love that need to be a staple in your relationship, right? And if you haven't done a good job at that, it could be potentially bad, you know, for your relationship and raising those kids. And we ultimately got a divorce after 5 years. Just after 5 years, we got a divorce. So now we are divorced. We have three children. I have custody. Excuse me. I have a lot of custody. She has the kids primarily. I'm paying her child support, all these things you hear about. And it's more stressful. It's more stress on me. It's more stress on her. She's having to take care of these kids basically by herself. I think she had her grandmother was helping her a little bit, but it's not the same. I mean, and I said, no fault to her. It doesn't, relationship doesn't matter how it ended or why it ended or whatever. The fact is like I'm talking about this relationship. I mean, this podcast is just about raising all these kids. And I'll tell you how we got up to eight as we progress through the podcasts. Um, God, there's so many things. There's so many underlying things. They really should have, as far as the building the relationship, um, prior to getting married or whatever, it should be a little bit longer and a little bit more in depth about, uh, building that relationship and about managing expectations and about all those things. And again, um, and this isn't, I'm trying to be careful on how I say it. I'm just going to say it, and then you can get a mom. I'll get a mom on here, and she can contradict me because I'm not saying it right. But I think women are generally more emotional than the guys, although I'm a pretty emotional person. And I was bound and determined after I had these three kids, and I invested my time, and this became my life. They say sometimes people will say, "Well, who are you?" And you say, "Well, I'm a dad." They say, "No, that's not who you are. That's what you do." No, that's who I am. I'm a father. I've been doing this for 39 years and I'm still raising kids now. And we'll get to that later. So this was my whole entire world with these three children. And that shouldn't have been the way it was. It should have been that my whole entire world was my wife, and we managed these three children together. And we didn't do that. She would probably, if she was on here, she'd probably agree with that. This was a long time ago, and but it affected the kids, and there's no doubt in my mind it affected how we parented. It affected, not seeing us together, us arguing, us, acting like children, and they're just sitting here kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. So I was involved as much as I could be. I had a ton of visitation, and I didn't miss my visitation. And so that first 5 years of having children became super stressful, right? Uh, and financially horrible because I'm paying this big nut on for child support. So I'm struggling. I'm trying to manage a job that's not an easy job. I don't think she was working at the time, so she was trying to manage three kids. Let me tell you, managing three kids all day, I'd take a job any day, especially kids that are under 5 years old, toddlers. Um, so that's kind of, like I said, there's a lot of pieces to all this, and my experiences are probably worse than a lot of other people you'll know. I hope I can explain that away, but it's just the reality. I mean, the decisions I made are the decisions that I made. Um, but those 5 years, like I said, complete prideful time with my children. They're all beautiful kids. They're all doing great now. But if I could change some things in that 5 years, I would have changed what I did before we got married. I'm not saying I wouldn't have got married. I just think that if we would have taken some more time and spent some more time together and learned about expectations, understand that in the 60s, well, actually before that, in the 50s, let's say, people got married that probably shouldn't have been married. But that's what you did. You got married. And then it was your responsibility to stay in that relationship. It wasn't about your feelings. Nobody cared about your feelings. Um, People that get married these days, people that have been married, maybe over the last 15 years, there a lot more resources and probably, I don't know, the divorce rate's still as high as it's ever been, but I tend to see people um, a little bit closer in beliefs or whatever. I don't even know what I'm trying to say there. I was kind of a hard ass. I was raised by a hard ass dad. That was my job as a parent, was to be the hard ass, to make the money, to do all those traditional things. It was total Leave It to Beaver, right? Now, we didn't have a Leave It to Beaver relationship, but that was my job as a parent, was to be that. And this entire podcast series is about my perception as a father. Like I said, not more important. Mom's not more important, equally important in their place. And they need to be, and you just need to understand that it's not all roses all the time. But you'll never do anything more rewarding in your life. Does that make sense? It's not logical, but it's true. Um, when my daughter was born, I went back to church. Let me check that. I never went to church before my daughter was born. So I got more involved in church. I got involved with the Knights of Columbus. But I felt like I was doing the right things, religiously, personally. Um, and frankly, my wife was not interested in that. And I should have known that before even though we got married in the Catholic Church, she had no interest in going to church. She had no interest in getting in, learning more about her religion or anything like that. So, but that all should have been clear when we got married, before we got married. And maybe that would have, I don't know. Listen, I don't regret any of it because I wouldn't have these three beautiful, beautiful children. So I don't regret it. And we have a great relationship now. All three of us talk on a regular basis. And unfortunately, they don't live next door, which I don't know if I'd want that anyway. But um, I think one of the things that's funny, my wife has a great relationship with her two daughters. Like they're always chatting with each other about different things. And I don't necessarily chat with my kids about the same things she chats with her kids about, right? Mom, daughters, dad, two daughters and a son. We have very different views on a lot of things, and they ask for advice sometimes, which is awesome. I love doing that. And sometimes they give me advice. I mean, technology's changed, things like that, so they're helping me too. So, like I said, as we get into this podcast, I'm going to get into a lot of stories that are you're going to blow you away. I'm going to get into a lot of problems we had with kids and some that we didn't have any problems with. I wouldn't say we didn't have any problems with. We had a problem with all the kids at some point, some serious, some not so serious, and I'm going to tell you about how I dealt with it versus how their mom dealt with it, and that's what kind of the whole podcast is about. So eventually, I hope to get enough guests and I get interest in this podcast so people will respond to me. And I think if you know a dad, a young father, or somebody that's planning on being a father, I think this podcast will help them. Um, they're going to have different ideas than I am just because of our generational gap. But um, I think it's going to be a really interesting podcast. So they're not going to be long podcasts. In fact, I'm getting ready to end this one now. So I'm kind of giving some background on my first three kids and what our relationship was about as and our marriage relationship. And frankly, it started off fine, and then we just really weren't ready to be married. But again, no regrets because I wouldn't have these three beautiful children. So this is episode one. Keep your eye out. They're going to get. I'm going to try to do two a week, and I'm going to pepper in one of my other podcasts too. Don't be afraid to listen to that. So this is Raising Eight, One Dad Stories of a Full House. How I've been doing this for like 39 years, and it is who I am. So you can go to YouTube, look for me on social media. I'm on Apple. I'm on all the different Amazon, everything you can think of where you listen to your podcast. You can contact me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. All my contact information's out there. If you want to shoot me a note, I'd be happy to hear it. If you have a question or you want me to comment on something that came to your mind, please hit me up and I'll make sure I address it. So thank you for listening. Stay tuned. A lot of episodes coming about fatherhood, and I hope I laid enough groundwork for you to understand what this podcast is going to be about. And it's going to get good. I'm telling you, I've had some experiences that are going to blow you away. So anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all soon.